there's always been moments where we were in challenging situations, and it's thinking about what happened. Well, I got out of it at some point. Like, even so many years ago, yes, I also landed that job. Was it tough? Yes, but I still got there. So
Yeah.
it's reminding yourself of those positive moments where you could prove yourself wrong.
Welcome to the Community Unlocked podcast, hosted by just me, Helena, this time round. While my partner in crime, Helena, is building her own new product, I've decided to keep this platform going and continue recording solo for now. So, normally this podcast is all about building, growing, and nurturing communities, and we've had the chance to speak with some wonderful experts who've shared their amazing insights. And today I'm using this platform to talk about something a little different. I'm turning my attention to a different kind of community, the community of job seekers. As some of you may know, I was recently on the job market myself. Let's just say it was a very interesting time, but the good thing is that along the way I connected with so many incredible people. And one of them is my guest today, Jennifer Paine. Jennifer is a career coach who helps women in tech land roles that align with their authentic selves. Since 2018, she's coached over 100 professionals, combining her experience in companies like LinkedIn, Contentful, and HiBob with her passion for building supportive communities. Having worked her way up from recruitment to sales leadership, Jennifer understands both the strategic and emotional aspects of having a tech career. Now, she's creating a movement that challenges traditional career advancement models, helping women build confidence from within while making bold moves in their careers. Whether tackling salary negotiation or processing self-doubt, Jennifer creates a space where ambitious women can feel seen, supported, and empowered to define success on their own terms. So I actually met Jennifer through a friend, and we went out for a coffee. And after our conversation, I felt so inspired, supported, and just genuinely moved. You know, it was one of those rare, honest, and really vulnerable conversations that just stay with you. I was so happy, I guess, after that conversation that right after the coffee, I messaged her and I said, "Hey, would you be up for recording a podcast together?" And she immediately said yes. So here we are. I'm so happy to share this conversation with all of you. Jen, hi. I'm so excited that you are here now. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's been a long time coming, so I'm really happy to be here.
I'd love to ask you, how did you end up coaching women in tech?
Yeah, so I've always been a person, I love helping others. And I've been that woman from a young age, from when I was still a little girl. And I guess until I got older, that's when I really realized that it made me very happy to make a positive impact on someone else's life or someone else's career, or actually both, because they're kind of connected to each other. And that's probably why I started my first ever job in recruitment. So I helped people land incredible jobs, helped them prepare for job interviews, and so on. And although that made me very happy, I did realize at the time that I was working in an environment that was kind of, keeping me small in a way. I felt like there's much more potential that didn't really come out. And that was back in 2018 when I decided to do a full pivot. I moved to Dublin, joined LinkedIn, and long story short, that's where I met someone who was like, well, if this is you, Jen, then coaching is something that you'll really enjoy doing. And right at that same time, I had a friend who had asked me to support her on her job search journey. So she was actually trying to move away from Dublin back to her home country to continue her career. And she wasn't able to land a job. And she was like, Jen, you've been a recruiter before. Can you help me out? Again, the person that I am, I was like, of course. I always say yes. Not always helping me, but most of the times it does make me very happy.
Yeah.
And I helped her land her job in just under a month. And that's when she started telling other people, like, if you need help with salary negotiations, go to Jen. If you need help with landing another job, go to Jen. And at that same time, I did a coaching course because LinkedIn was offering their employees to do peer-to-peer coaching. And that's where my whole journey started. And I realized mainly that the challenges that women face being a woman in tech, being an underrepresented group in the tech industry, that comes with lots of opportunities, but also many challenges. And it gave me lots of energy to focus on what are those challenges and helping women overcome those challenges. And that was kind of the start of my journey.
I know that you share a lot on LinkedIn. I think, well, someone connected us, but that's how I first discovered you. And you really share vulnerable stories almost every day. Well, you give tips, but then you also share your personal stories. And I know it's
Yeah,
not that easy to do. First of all, it's scary to post. Then on top of that, it's scary to share something vulnerable. But as I understand,
yeah.
sharing something vulnerable really resonates. What has your experience been?
Yeah, it's a really great question because I remember when I started my career coaching business officially, which is now a little over a year ago, almost 1.5 years ago,
Mhm.
actually. Um, I felt like I can only start posting when I've officially registered my business with the Dutch Chamber of Commerce. And it was a very strange thought to have. And I share
Mhm.
it actually whenever I talk to people, because for me, that moment of registering my business felt like the official start of it, even though
Mhm.
I had already been coaching and sharing my experiences with women for years. But
Mhm.
it felt like that was the official start of my business. So that was the official start of me sharing my experiences publicly on LinkedIn for the entire world to see. And because I had been sharing my own stories and experiences with women offline, if you
Mhm.
will, it helped me to see that women were actually recognizing themselves in lots of those stories, whether it was me being underpaid, whether it was me having, you know, unsupportive managers,
Mhm.
lots of similar challenges that clearly not enough people talk about on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So I decided to take the plunge. I, started posting vulnerable stories and really showing not just the positive things that have happened in my life and in my career and, being a woman in tech, but also the challenges and also the things, the adversities that I faced.
Mhm.
And I just got this huge wave of women reaching out and telling me that they appreciate me sharing my story. It's women reaching out, or whenever I have an introduction call with someone to potentially coach them, they're like, "Oh, I've been following you for a year and I feel like we already know each other and
Mhm.
you've gone through so much. And you sharing your story makes it easier for me to now share my story with you." So it kind of creates this ripple effect
Mhm.
of women daring to speak up about their challenges that they're facing, the things that are not going well for them,
Mhm.
which actually creates a more vulnerable and more transparent culture in tech, but especially also among women in tech. Like, you're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think, in terms of vulnerability and sharing stories, there is this podcaster, and she's also an activist and actress, whatever not. Her name's Jamila Jamil. Maybe you know about her.
I
And
don't.
she's super vulnerable. Of course, she
Okay.
has a huge voice now, but she shares very personal, very kind of raw stories that makes
Yeah.
people see her as a human. And people admire her for it because we can all recognize certain things in her about ourselves. And it's such a human experience because we all experience doubt, different struggles, but somehow it's considered not cool enough, or I don't know, you should appear tough. And we're going to talk more about it because it's such a big thing in the work culture, especially in tech.
Yeah, and I think that's especially that connection piece, like it also creates trust between people, and ultimately realizing that we're not alone and we're all going through these experiences, that it actually opens the door to, again, being more transparent about it, and therefore also helping each other overcome those challenges rather than feeling like I'm alone and I have to deal with this myself on my
Yeah.
own, and maybe feeling like nobody else is going through this. It helps us create this wave of, let's stand up against the things that we're experiencing and let's help each other be more successful and overcome these challenges, which has been the most positive, I guess, effect
Yeah.
of me sharing my posts and talking about this with others like yourself.
Exactly. I couldn't agree more. And also, I just had this thought that when you see, what you perceive successful women talking about their vulnerabilities, and success can mean a lot of different things. But if we're talking
Yeah.
about work, someone, who is doing really well in their career, you look up to them and you think, wow, will I ever be there? Will I ever make it? And then you see them sharing these stories and you're like, but
Yes.
we are so similar. And so I can do this too. And I think,
Yeah.
unfortunately, there's not enough of that. I'm seeing more and more of it, but definitely we need to see more for sure.
I agree.
So that's why we're here. So we're here because we want to help other women. I don't think only women will benefit from this, but women especially, support them through their journey in the tech job market, because now it's a particularly hard time, it seems. It doesn't seem, it is actually a particularly hard time.
Yeah.
So let's chat about the state of the market, the tech market, and you're working with women, you're helping them land their jobs, or through this process of rejections and trying again. It's very hard. So can you tell me a bit more about your experience?
It's definitely a very tough market right now, and especially for women where there's already like societal conditions, like how we were raised, how we've been brought up. There's just lots of challenges right now that are not uncommon. Like they're actually very common among women.
Mm-hmm.
When we're talking about, downplaying achievements, we don't want to brag,
Mm.
or it's like we're not advocating for ourselves. We're kind of working really hard and hoping that our achievements will be recognized, whether that's in within your company trying to get promoted, or whether it's not speaking up about our achievements when we're going for job interviews.
Yeah.
It's about underestimating our abilities when we're in that job search, and all those things lead to, unfortunately, holding ourselves back. It's kind of these patterns that are ingrained in ourselves that are holding us back from actually landing our jobs. And I mean, the market is brutal right now. I've definitely seen that at the start of this year, there's more open roles.
Mm.
My clients are landing interviews. I'm seeing the celebration posts on LinkedIn about like, hey, I landed my role. But at the same time, there's a stark contrast because we also see the mass layoff messages,
Yeah.
unfortunately, right? The
Yeah.
messages of people adding the green banner to their profile picture on LinkedIn, like, hey, I'm open for work. I got laid off. Despite my great
Mm-hmm.
achievements or my exceeding expectations
Mm-hmm.
performance review, I'm losing my job. So there's a lot going on right now in terms of tough job markets, and then at the same time, it's like we're still facing challenges as women,
Yeah.
um, on how can we actually land those roles.
Yeah. You started talking about social conditioning, and this, I guess, ties very, very neatly into us struggling to land jobs or get interviews or
Yeah.
advocating for ourselves. And I can see it in myself a lot. And I was talking to a man yesterday about this conversation that we were going to have.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as I told you earlier, he basically said, "Yeah, but just what's the problem? Just don't do that." And it's not possible. It's not possible to just suddenly decide, okay, do you know what? These social conditioning that are deeply ingrained somewhere in me somewhere,
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
may not even agree with, I will support other women and tell them this absolutely not true, but I will still impose it. There is like this, this choir of voices telling you all these things that
Yeah.
you're supposed to do. So maybe let's chat about what those are. I can begin talking about myself.
Yeah.
The
Go
way I
ahead.
was brought up, I was told, like a lot of women, especially I spent a lot of my youth in Eastern Europe, which is particularly brutal in that regard.
Yeah.
I was told, well, you better be quiet, don't raise your voice. Nobody's interested in what you have to share.
Wow.
Nobody's interested in your opinions. Nobody's interested in your worries. You just have to, keep going. Work is hard anyway. If you're struggling at work, just shut up because everybody struggles. Well,
Wow.
growing up, working, I have struggled, of course, a lot, but now I also realize that it doesn't have to be like this. But I
Yeah.
still struggle with advocating for myself, sharing my
Yeah.
wins,
Yeah.
being too shy to share things online, like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
you do, which I absolutely admire, because it is not easy. And I think there are so many of us in the same situation, right? And there's probably
Yeah.
more. Maybe you
Yeah.
can share a bit what you have seen.
Yeah, definitely. For me, there's a huge like sort of strive to be perfect.
Yes.
That was me from a young age. So whether it was, a 7 is not good enough, I need to go for a 10, whether it's having to over prepare for a test or a presentation, not necessarily resulting in like an actual better grades.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like now I'm getting older, or at least maybe at the start of my career, I was definitely the woman who was like, okay, if I just put my head down and work really hard, that's what's going to end up in me getting promoted. While now I'm like, it's, what is it now, 12, 14 years down the line, I realize like that's not at all the case. Like
Yeah.
putting my head down and working hard resulted in me practically burning out.
Mm-hmm.
And the promotion was nowhere in sight. I can tell you that.
No. Yeah.
Um, so like the not advocating for myself is also a really big piece, or at least it was back then. Also people pleasing, also something that was a big one for me. And when you're growing up, you don't even realize that that's happening, right? It's when you get older and you start
Mm-hmm.
recognizing certain patterns, like why am I not getting promoted, or why do I have trouble speaking up about my achievements, or why do I find it so hard to set boundaries for myself? That's when you realize, like, this is coming from somewhere. Like I've been conditioned, I've been brought up to do this, and it's not serving me.
Yeah, I know, I know. I'm so similar. And again, I was talking to a fellow community person. He asked me, "Oh, but
Sure.
why don't you share more?" Because he shares. And I said, "I don't know. I guess it feels like I'm bragging. I don't want people to think that I'm bragging about my successes." And he said,
Yeah.
"Well, do you ever think that about others?" And I was like, "I don't think so." He was like,
Such a good point.
yeah, he told me that, and I was like, yeah, I don't think I ever think, oh yeah, look at her, she thinks she's better than everyone. What I
No.
normally think is, well, I want to be able to do that too, but
Yeah.
for now I'm just too uncomfortable, and I don't want people to think this. And what if that colleague from 5 years ago thinks that about me? What if that classmate from school thinks that, look at what happened to Helena, etc.?
Yeah.
It's not easy, that's for sure.
It's not. And the funny thing is that men are usually much more pragmatic
Mhm.
about the challenges that we're facing. And that's where we're quite different. Not everyone, of course. I
Mhm.
don't want to generalize,
Yeah.
but I see it with lots of men around me where it's like, oh yeah, but just do this, or just speak up. And it's like when this is ingrained, like when this has literally been our entire upbringing, just doing XYZ, unfortunately, is not going to, like, I wish it was that easy.
Yeah.
And even with myself, I see it that whether it's limiting beliefs or whether it's kind of that negative thought process that might pop up at times, it really, like, it takes time. Like, you
Yeah.
really need to, like, almost reframe those beliefs, reframe those thoughts, and actively practice this going forward. I mean, we can talk about how we can do this at some point too, but it takes time. And I think that's the biggest realization. But awareness is the first step to changing. So if you don't even know that you're downplaying your achievements, or if you don't know that you're constantly over apologizing, constantly saying sorry for something while you
Ooh,
didn't do anything
yes.
wrong, that's also a big one. Then it's going to be very hard to change.
Saying sorry, I think, is such a common thing. I had to actively train myself not to say sorry, and I still do it all the time, not quite as much. And these situations at work when there's a meeting and you're sitting there thinking like, what the hell was that? I have no idea what's going on, but you think probably everyone understands and it's just me. And
Yes.
then
Oh, yeah.
somebody, a colleague, a woman, speaks up and she says, I remember this very particular example, and she says, "Oh, I think it's probably a very stupid question, but," asks the question that everybody literally wanted to
That's
ask but was so
so
ashamed.
true.
And I'm like, well, she shouldn't say that, but I would have done the same. And I'm like, why do we do this? And that's how we also downplay ourselves without realizing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. And again, you need to be aware of it. Someone actually told me years ago that
Mm-hmm.
I was constantly apologizing for something while I didn't do anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's that was an active practice for me to actually almost like write down like a little one on a piece of paper or in my phone whenever I heard myself say sorry, or
Mm-hmm.
whenever I read an email back and I was like, see, I was apologizing for responding after 2 days rather
Yeah.
than 1 day, which is also like, why am I even apologizing for that?
Yes.
But then still like recognizing like, okay, like catching myself, oh, I said sorry there, which I really didn't have to. So like an active practice, like writing it down for myself. When am I doing this? When am I catching myself say sorry? And then think about how can I change this? How can I reframe this? And that definitely helps.
Yeah.
And then as you're getting older and like you just have more experience in life, I guess that also helps to be more sure of yourself
Mm-hmm.
and to be more, advocating for yourself at the same time.
You mentioned reframing earlier, and I guess it's a good moment to talk about it. You coach women, as we have already said, and I bet you're helping them reframe because, we've all been in this job search process. It's so disheartening. You doubt
Yeah.
yourself, you doubt all your decisions, you just think you're the worst and you're never going to land a job, and that's it. You,
Yeah.
you, you ruined your career by deciding to leave another, or whatever your situation may be.
Yeah.
So I imagine that you really have to work through it with your clients. Do you have some examples of how you help, or some exercises that's really something small and practical that you can integrate into your daily life in this process? And maybe
Yeah.
also what you have seen change when women successfully do that.
Something that works really well is to ask yourself a couple of questions whenever you're noticing limiting beliefs or negative thoughts that are holding you back.
Mm-hmm.
So, on the one hand, it's just writing down the limiting belief or the negative thought that you're having, and then asking yourself, what proof do you have that this statement is true? And usually there is not a lot of proof. So if it's like, I will never land a job, for instance, it's like, okay, what evidence do you have that that's true? Now, of course, you can say I've applied to 4 jobs and I haven't landed a job yet. But then we also need to look at, okay, like the market right now is very tough and it's
Mm-hmm.
very challenging. So maybe 5 years ago, yes, I landed a job after just 4 applications or 4 interviews. But right now, that practically doesn't happen anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like asking ourselves, like, what proof do we have that actually shows that this thought is true? And what proof do we have against this fact?
Yeah.
And then actively reframing this negative thought into a more positive thought. Or I don't like toxic positivity, but it can also be a more I call it a more hopeful thought. So
Yeah.
we want to still recognize that we are in a challenging situation and then offer a more hopeful perspective. So it could look something like, yes, the market is tough, but I'm trying everything in my power to land a job and I'm going to keep going because I will get there.
What really helps to me is like, okay, this is the situation that is out of my control. But what
Yes.
is in my control is doing the best that I can,
Yeah.
um, recognizing that this is the best that I can do right now. Also, thinking about, okay, what is the worst scenario that can happen? What is it that I'm really afraid of? And if you
Yeah.
spin out of control, you're like, okay, I'll live under a bridge. That's
Yes.
fine. I will lose
that's
everything.
that's pretty bad.
Yeah, that's me. That's me. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. And
Yeah.
truthfully, having a job is a very important thing for your life. So I
Yeah.
even saw someone on LinkedIn who probably is struggling a lot, right? Oh, it's a life or death situation. And I'm like, okay, and I was like, this is me, and on a bad day.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at the same time, like, okay, Helena, this is the situation, and what you can do. You have all these skills and you will continue pushing, but you can do this, that, and the other. Get a part-time job, do this, do that, and you will be
Yeah.
fine. And
Yeah.
another thing that I think about is all the times in the past that I punished myself and drilled myself and like was so mean to myself, thinking that nothing will work out because I'm not good enough, then thinking back and thinking, but it all worked out in the end. Why it was
Definitely.
such a waste of my time punishing myself
Yeah.
like this, and the world and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. It's really offering yourself some perspective. That's
Yeah.
also really important because you're so right. Like there's always been moments where we were in challenging situations and it's thinking about what happened. Well, I got out of it at some point. Like even so many years ago, yes, I also landed that job. Was it tough? Yes, but I still got there. So
Yeah.
it's reminding yourself of those positive moments where you could prove yourself wrong, right? Like I'll never
Mhm.
land that job. Okay, but back then it was also challenging and I still managed to land the role. So that's a
Yeah.
super helpful thought. And something that also worked well for women who were particularly negative to
Mhm.
themselves is like, um, imagine that your best friend is going through this. What would you tell your best friend?
Yeah.
Because usually you wouldn't tell your best friend, yes, you're right, you will never land that job, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, who's going to say that? Because one, it isn't true, and two, it's not a helpful thought. So that can also really help. But I have to say, like, it is also practicing this and keep reminding yourself of this. So I have
Mm.
clients literally writing these more hopeful statements or encouraging thoughts and statements on a post-it note and putting it on their laptop, or actively journaling about it at the
Mhm.
end of the day. So what are some negative thoughts that are coming up for me right now,
Mhm.
and what are more helpful thoughts? How I can like reframe this
Mhm.
and help myself. And you're literally rewiring your brain, training your brain to, rather than seeing the negative, trying
Yeah.
to look for more helpful thoughts.
Yeah.
But it does take time. It's not something where, sure, you write it down once and your brain is rewired. That's not how it works. So sometimes people are looking for like a quick fix, or like, okay, this, I need something that will help me today or like feel better
Yeah.
tomorrow, and that's unfortunately doesn't really, it doesn't work that way.
No, and every time I manage to reframe, whatever I send out to the universe, the energy or whatever, something positive comes back. And I don't know if because
Yeah.
I just do something differently or there is really some power of the universe, but it does make things a bit lighter.
Yeah, but I also think that when you think more hopeful or more positive thoughts, that you're automatically more open-minded to receive positivity.
Yeah.
And when you're in that negative spiral, it's very hard. If someone says like, "Oh, you look nice today," you're like, whatever. Like they probably didn't mean it, or they just said it to make me feel better.
Mhm.
While if you're already in that slightly more positive state, it's also easier to receive the positivity that is around you. And it's an upward spiral, right? Like the
Yeah.
more you practice this, the better you get, and the less negative thoughts pop up. Will it ever stop? Probably not.
No.
I mean, I feel like I have quite a positive mindset and
Mhm.
I still get negative thoughts. I still have
Yeah.
those days where I'm like, everything's going wrong or this is happening to me. But now I have so many tools to actually help me reframe that and luckily kind of scrap the thought and move on.
Yeah. This is happening to me is definitely something that I've victimized myself over.
I know.
And trying to understand that I have the power to also do something about it. It's not just things keep happening and I'm just here waiting.
Yeah.
Yes. Moving on a bit. Let's talk about something a bit more practical. I saw a post you wrote where I really recognized myself, and you're like, women who do manage to land jobs or, who are a bit more structured, they don't apply to 500 jobs in the middle of the night. Been there, done that in panic.
Mm.
Things like one after another, oh God, I'll end up under that bridge in no time. I should just figure this out quick. But you said that they have a plan and there are certain steps that you mentioned. So I'd love you to elaborate a bit on that because it really also puts things in perspective for me, because
Yeah.
applying for 500 jobs at midnight, not giving yourself any rest, constantly punishing yourself does not work, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's exhausting for sure. And I understand that that's the sort of go-to way, especially when you need a job right now, because maybe you've been laid off or you've been without work for a while. It's understandable that you kind of think like, what is the fastest way to land a job? Okay, I'll just fire out mass applications. But unfortunately, because the competition is so high, mass applying usually means just sending the same CV to maybe different kind of roles to different companies. Like it's not tailored. There's no
Mhm.
thought or intentionality behind it. And that results in just overworking yourself, stressing yourself out, actually leading to burnout, unfortunately,
Mhm.
where people
Mhm.
are like, okay, I haven't been able to do anything for the past months because I'm just, I'm actually
Mhm.
burnt out. And even though it's still a tough market, being more intentional about the roles that you go for and just your approach in general, I've seen with my clients works really well. And it starts with, what am I actually looking for? What role am I targeting? Because again, what I see a lot is, let's just start applying kind of scattered approach. I might want to go for an account manager role, but I'm also interested actually in a manager role because wouldn't it be fun to be a
Mhm.
manager? But I also see this sort of associate assistant role at a startup that also looks interesting.
Mhm.
Let me just go for it.
Mhm.
But without really looking at like, okay, what are my strengths? What do I love doing? Like, what am I really the best fit for? It doesn't mean that you'll never be able to make, to become a manager, but you want to look at also like, what is your priority right now? Do I need to land the job as quick as possible? Or am I in the comfort of a role and do I have time to actually go for maybe my dream role, even though it takes a bit longer?
Mhm.
So that's actually a very important first step. And then realizing what is the role that I'm actually targeting, because that will help you then highlight the right achievements, results, impacts that you've made in your previous roles.
Mhm.
Because I see a lot of sort of generic CVs being sent out to all of these different roles. I mean, I used to be a recruiter and I used to be a hiring manager. So I've been on all sides
Mhm.
of the table because obviously I've also been an applicant. So I've seen lots of generic CVs being sent out to different types of roles. And when there is an abundance of candidates, which is the case right now, recruiters and hiring managers are looking at profiles in a way of who can solve my problem. So if you're sending the same CV, the same generic bland CV that looks more usually like a job description than an actual, document that you can be proud of, like this is me, this is what I can bring to your company,
Mhm.
you're just going to get rejected. So understanding what is your main priority is a first important step. Do I need to land a role very fast because of whatever reason? Or do I have time to go for a role that really suits me? Then the
Mhm.
next step is focusing on one target role or like one sort of job function. Going for an individual contributor role and a management role at the same time with the same CV usually doesn't work out.
Mhm.
Because if you don't know what you're looking for, you're not going to be able to bring that across to recruiters and hiring managers. Then once you know that role that you're going for, it's going to be important to highlight, okay, what have I done in the past that helps me solve what this hiring manager and recruiter is looking
Mhm.
for right now? So that's going to be key. And then we want to focus on adding metrics and results, like actually
Mhm.
quantify them. How much more revenue did you help bring the business? How many more users are using the product because of your work? How many processes have you streamlined and how much time have you helped save the business with that? Those are the things that really drive the needle, and implementing those or integrating those into your CV and on your LinkedIn profile will help people see like, okay, that's the value that she can add. This is the woman we want to invite for an interview. I think those are the
Mhm.
most important starting points. And then in this competitive market, leveraging your network is going to
Yeah.
be key also in landing opportunities. That doesn't mean that you need to have a really big network already, but you just need to take the right steps in terms of being open enough, I guess, to reach out to people,
Mhm.
asking for help, which is something that many women
Mhm.
struggle with. Putting yourself out there, sending out messages, connecting with your friends, your inner circle, and asking them for help. Doesn't always have to be sending out cold messages. but you have to put yourself out there, because just applying to a role on LinkedIn or on a company website usually isn't the road to success, no matter how good your CV is.
Yeah. And of course, it also really depends on what's out there. Sometimes it isn't.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think adding structure and understanding to what you're doing also gives you a bit of calm.
And also, when you're more intentional about the value that you can bring, the role that you're going for, it also helps you pick the right company. So I always advise, I go for, say, 10 to 15 target companies as a starting point.
Mm.
If they have open roles, great. You can see if you can get a referral, or see if you can connect to someone to get that warm way into the company. But if they don't have an open role right now, it's actually a better situation, because it helps you to make the connections before you need them. I mean, I see so many people like, okay, I need to network because I'm looking for a job now. And it's like, yeah, it's better to start before you actually need the network, to build it up, because it does take time. So being intentional about your steps, or about your job search, I should say, and knowing what to focus on, it actually helps you to put a more qualitative application together, to think about, why does this company interest me? Like, is it something that the CEO shared about the mission? Do I have a personal connection to the product or to the service that this company is selling? And all those sort of touch points, or all those, I guess, intentional steps that you're taking in doing your research, they help you build a very qualitative application. And yes, it's a different approach versus mass applying, but recruiters and hiring managers are also looking for people who are intentional, because the better your motivation, the better your answers, the more you've thought about this, the better a fit you seem for the role. And that's ultimately what leads to success. That's what helps you land the role.
Thinking about, imagine you do land your interview. Amazing, you're excited. Still, it's a long process. We know some interview process can land forever. I personally was in one that was like 7 or 8 rounds, which was absolute nonsense looking back.
Whoa.
Looking
Yeah.
back, how can we identify red flags or something that we don't feel good about? And I think, again, it can be practical, but it can also be emotional, because again, as a woman, I often tell myself that what I felt or thought is probably not true. Probably I imagined it, and it's probably fine, or people will think I'm just an emotional woman, and, they won't take me seriously. So what kind of major things can one look out for, you think?
There's a couple of things to look out for, and it does depend a little bit on the type of company that you're looking for, because there's women who are super comfortable working in a male dominated environment, right? So we need to really make sure that we understand what we are looking for. So what are my non-negotiables? What are my priorities for landing a role? I love an inclusive and diverse workforce, because I've experienced firsthand how much you can learn from other people, and how faster we can move when we have diverse perspectives. When everyone just is and says the same, you just don't end up with the same results. So it starts with understanding what your priorities are as a first starting point. Now, I've always looked for companies where there's women in leadership. For me, that was always a really good sign of an inclusive and diverse company. So I know, unfortunately, quite a few companies where there's definitely a lack of women in leadership. And I've also heard quite some bad stories about the culture at those companies. I'm now talking about a specific few companies that I know of, where, women burn out very fast. They feel very unsupported by leadership. There's no clear paths to success for women. And because there are no other women in leadership that are, potentially supporters for these women working as individual contributors, or maybe as managers as well, it just doesn't lead to a positive work environment. So for me, seeing that companies are actively promoting women and promoting them into leadership roles, senior leadership roles, can be a very good sign. Also, when companies have very clear DE&I initiatives, for me, always a very good sign. As an example, I used to work at LinkedIn, and they have lots of different employee resource groups, whether it's women at LinkedIn, whether it's other groups at LinkedIn. They really create that culture of everybody belongs here. You can
Mhm.
bring your whole self to work. And for me, that's always been a very positive sign.
Yeah.
Now, what's an important thing to that you can do when you're in an interview process is to also actively, even outside of the interview process, talk to other women who are working at that company right now, because we're women, like, we're supporting each other, right? We want to help each other out. So if you're in an interview process and you have potential doubts about the culture, about, ooh, is this going to be the right place for me? Like, do they even promote women? Are there active
Mhm.
promotion paths? Of course, every company says that they're a great company, their culture is the best, their product is the best. Yes, you can get promoted, but usually having conversations outside of the actual interview process can help you figure out, is this really true? Can I get some examples of this? And if you're talking woman to woman, it can really help you to ask some of the vulnerable questions and
Mhm.
see if this is the right workplace for you. And I'll give you one very concrete example. I've been having lots of conversations with women about companies that I worked at before. And I know that other women have also opened up their calendars to have those same conversations. And opening the door that way to those transparent conversations can help you ask those vulnerable questions. And fortunately, but unfortunately, it has led to some women saying, like, okay, I need to actually get out of this interview process because this does not sound like the right environment for me. And again, this ties into your own priorities. So if you want to work in a supportive environment, where leadership actually supports women, and you hear from someone in the team that that's not the case, and sometimes those women have said, like, look, I'm close to burnout, or I'm thinking about leaving this company
Mhm.
because leadership isn't supporting women, as an example. I mean, you kind of want to know that before you sign a contract. And usually you don't get this information from the general interview process.
Yeah, absolutely. And something to add is that when you feel something's off, most of the time it is probably off.
Yes,
It applies to
so
different things
true.
in life, but in this case as well, every time I have felt something was off, I was right. It's very rare that it's like the anxiety takes over. If you feel it like deep in your gut, and you're like,
Yeah,
It's probably right. But of course, we can still gaslight ourselves into thinking we imagined it all. You also train yourself to understand these things. And maybe it is a
yeah.
positive thing. I also think about positives of job searching for a long time. You really train yourself to recognize certain things. You train yourself
Oh, yeah.
to be a more kind to yourself, to be resilient, and in a good way of resilience, not just
Yeah,
burning yourself to the ground.
yeah,
Respecting yourself, and just cheering yourself on, knowing that you are okay and you can rely on yourself. Something that I also want to touch on, there's all this conversation about feminine and masculine energy in the workplace, right? People are posting about it. There's this whole conversation of this feminine masculine energy in general, which I think is highly problematic, because again, this is the social conditioning that we have been led to believe that we are a certain way. In a way, we all perform this, right? Talking about gender norms, etc. It's all very performative
yeah,
because we have been told
yeah,
that this is the way we perform. So men perform in one way, women in another. Of course, there are many different variations. And this idea of workplace, of people succeeding, there is this very old, very clear idea that it's someone who doesn't have emotions, who's resilient, who is a bit tough. um, I used to think that too, and I've seen a lot of women showing these, women in leadership or women in high positions showing these traits, and totally understandable why, because this world is very male dominated. It's hard, and to survive, this is what we do. But I think now that the world's evolving and we are talking more about this, I feel like we can achieve so much more by showing these traditionally feminine traits. That is empathy, vulnerability. Those
yeah,
are so powerful. I feel like when we are kinder to each other, when we're more empathetic, when we lead from within and we stay true to who we are, not through being tough and telling someone that they have to just buckle up and just
Yeah, get
go on,
over it.
get over it and just stop doing something. Really showing empathy and trying to understand where we come from. Workplaces will be more inclusive, will feel more supportive. The best managers that I've had, they they were women coincidentally, but also they could really do this for me, which I'm forever grateful for, because they helped
Yeah.
me understand what my strengths were, and they nurtured it in me, and they really catapulted me in my career. And
Yeah.
that was because of that, not because they told me to buckle up and just keep going until I burn out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, it's spot on. I was actually thinking while you were saying how your best managers have been women or were women. I've experienced the same actually. I would say I've had two really really good managers. Both were women. I actually had a man who was also a really supportive manager. And when I think about the traits, I already said it, right? Supportive. You mentioned it too. Empathetic, understanding. I mean, we're all going through challenges. We're all going through stuff in life that impacts us in the workplace. And like I really dislike the whole like hustle culture vibe. I've probably been that way. Like I was sort of working in that hustle culture or having that hustle culture mentality myself at some point, because to your point, it's like, okay, I thought that that was good, or I thought that that was necessary to move forward, but it led to me burning out. My experience now, also being a bit more experienced, being a bit older, realize that actually the best workplaces, the most supportive workplaces, were the ones where I could show up as my authentic self. And I know that this gets thrown around a lot. Like, what does that mean? It literally means that I wasn't afraid to share what I was going through. So if something happened in my personal life, some people say like, oh, you shouldn't bring your personal life to work. It's like, actually, how can we not do that? Because it does impact us also at work positively, but it can also do so negatively, right? And having someone as your manager or someone next to you who will support you through those moments, for me, that led to me wanting to show even more of myself. I'm like, if you're willing to be understanding, if you're telling me, Jen, close your laptop, go focus on what you need to focus on now, and we'll talk again tomorrow, or whatever the situation is whenever we talk again, I'm like, giving me that trust and that understanding, that makes me want to work 10 times harder for you, also for myself, of course, because I'm like, okay, I have the time to focus on my issue, and now I can move on again. Whereas when I was working in that more, also generating that myself or doing that myself, that more like, I need to push through, I need to just keep going, and yes, I didn't sleep, yes, I'm stressing, but if I just push through, I will get there. That's actually what burns me out. So it's both taking the right steps yourself, being kinder to yourself, and realizing when you need help. That gut feeling also comes into play. But working with in a supportive company with a supportive manager, it can actually help turn workplaces around, increase productivity. So I've definitely seen companies make big changes, positive changes, and I'm hoping that that's a trend we can hold on to.
Definitely hoping so, and we'll see better results and people burning out less, and
I hope so too.
feeling more confident and happier. We're wrapping up, but there's something very important I want to discuss. We've been talking about vulnerability support, and you have been coaching women, you've been sharing a lot online, people have been coming to you asking for help, or just sharing that whatever you wrote or said really resonated. So this really shows to me that there is this need for community of women to support each other, right? So we really need to be there for each other. We really need to share these vulnerabilities, because we all, as we already said, we all struggle, we all have tough times. And I know that you've seen this trend, and I really hope that we can do more of this, be more present, be more vulnerable online. Can you tell me a bit more about the trend you've been seeing?
Definitely. Since I started my coaching business, because I've been talking to hundreds of women since starting, whether it
Mm-hmm.
was through, potentially working with them, or whether it was just talking to women about what are they going through, what are their goals, what are they working on, because I love talking about these topics. I'm a huge advocate for women, a huge advocate for finding fulfilling careers, being happy in your career, because that also transforms your life in a positive way. Through having those conversations, I have learned that unfortunately we're not yet at a place where every woman feels comfortable enough to share her story. So I think that definitely ties into the sharing your authentic
Mm-hmm.
stories, being transparent, being vulnerable. But I do think that there's a huge need, or I know that there's a huge need for more spaces that where actually women can show up as their authentic selves, especially when that place might not be the workplace for you. You still want to have the opportunity to talk about, yes, your challenges, but also your goals. And sometimes the workplace doesn't support that either, or your manager doesn't support
Mm-hmm.
you in that. So it's like coming together as women to talk about what are the goals that you're working towards, talk about that promotion, how am I going to get a raise, talking about networking, but not in a transactional way, because I feel like lots of networking is just perceived as, okay, when I need someone, I'm going to reach out to
Mm-hmm.
them. But actually talking to others and building that community of ambitious women who are there to cheer each other on, help each other out. It's definitely something that has come up in many, many conversations. And the funny thing is, I have done lots of one on one coaching where I help women land roles. And last year, I actually, out of getting requests from women, started a first group coaching program
Mm-hmm.
where I also have a private community where these women talk about, sharing their wins, talking about their challenges, helping each other out. And you just see this incredible community come together where, they get to know each other and they start helping each other out. They start connecting outside of the job searching community. They refer each other to jobs. They give each other advice. It's like, oh, I read this amazing book. Maybe you'd also love to read it. And you kind of see this whole sort of ecosystem grow. And I'm like, there's a huge need for more of this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic too, but I'm like, stay tuned. Like, I feel something brewing here. Let me know what you think.
Yeah, I think something's brewing here, and I think there is a need for that. And I told you before, I think that I'm naturally, it's in my character to be very open and vulnerable.
Which I
It
love.
has had bad consequences on me for sure, but I mean, by far, I think 80-90% has been positive, and I would not change who I am. I'd rather have those bad
Yeah.
consequences, and still remain myself. And I noticed that when I share with women, even who I don't know for too long, certain struggles, I mean, of course, not too much, let's talk about job searching, like really deeply.
Yeah.
So many times, almost every time, the woman who I'm talking to would be like, do you know what, I've gone through the same. I never talked about this to anybody, but since you
Yeah.
mentioned, and we would have this deep conversation, deep connection, and we would eventually probably become friends, or at least start forming some kind of a group. And it has huge power, and I think that's the power of community. And community, when we talk about community, it's not only about tech communities around the product. Like, the true community are your communities, like your friends.
Yes.
It is your community. And I see a huge need for that. I think the more we are online, and I guess everybody's talking about this, AI, everything, more digitalization, the more we need each other, the more we need this human touch. And that's why I love, for example, my job. I think it is not going to be replaceable, because we are people, we are social. Our whole life revolves around one another, and we can just be a bit kinder and a bit sweeter and softer to each other. And I would love to contribute to that. And I think that's also what we have done today. And, disclaimer, I know people have many different situations, and job searching is hard. And I saw people losing their homes and everything. And of course, I don't know how to solve that at the moment. And it's truly tough. And I have huge empathy. But I hope this conversation that we've had spoke to the community of women, and not only women, really, just people, and showed them a bit of support and a bit of understanding and recognition to their struggles, because they're not alone, we're not alone, and it's important to recognize that.
I so agree. I really loved this conversation. I feel like it was just flowing and we're just like continuously talking. I feel like we could keep going for days.
Yes.
Which is a good sign, right? Maybe there needs to be a podcast 2.0,
Yes.
where we go into even more topics.
Yes, exactly. We will learn something after this, talk to people, and then we can come back and discuss more. And whoever listens to this or watches this, please reach out to me if you want to chat, or if something resonated with you. I guess, Jen, this is your job to start with, to connect women, to help them. So I'm sure you would be interested to hear what people think too.
Yeah. I mean, anyone can always reach out to me. No strings attached, right? I love having conversations. Women reach out to me all the time, like, can you give me advice on this? Or I would also host webinars, master classes on job searching topics, post lots of content about the topics, and conversations flow from that naturally, right? So if you do have questions, if something resonated, if you might have an idea about topics that we can talk about next, definitely reach out and let's keep the conversation going.
Yes, please. And Jen, thank you so much. I love talking to you now, and when we're just having a coffee, I always come out of our conversations feeling so recharged and hopeful, and just thank you for that.
Thank you so much for the invitation. I so agree with you. I think we should also schedule our next coffee very soon.
Yes.
So that we can talk about anything else and everything else, as we always do. But I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope it was valuable for the listeners too. And thanks again for the invitation.
Thank you. And I chat to you very soon.
Chat soon.
Ciao. Thank you so much for listening. If our conversation resonated with you, please consider subscribing to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Your ratings and reviews are invaluable in helping us reach more like-minded people. You can find all our episodes and learn more about the show at communityunlocked.substack.com. See you in the next episode.